Hi, this is Graphically Alex coming at you with all things fat related. If that's something that interests you, please subscribe. I'd love to have you. So today we're going to react to this. I haven't watched this at all. I want to just watch it and then we'll talk about it. But she apparently talks about therapy in this, and I want to see what she says. So I feel like some zombie behavior may be going on. We will track it down. So let's go.
A lot of the therapy that I've been through in my life has been for eating or trauma related
Gotta cut that
needs.
off.
And a lot of what I've done in that therapy is unlearning fat phobia. Fat phobia is a societal stigma. Societal stigma, say that 3 times fast. Societal stigma that does affect people the same way that people who are gay experience discrimination, people who have disabilities experience discrimination. The phobia that's at the end of fat phobia, same thing that's at the end of homophobia, ableism, racism, sexism, like they all come together, and not those struggles are not the same in any ways, which I really try to not compare them, but there are a lot of parallels, and I don't think a lot of people have framed their brains to be able to see fat phobia. Now, I make a lot of content on my page about being plus size, specifically about fashion and other things that like help being plus size. And sometimes, even though I have been through a ton of therapy and a ton of unlearning, I also have a degree in sociology, still get beat down. And that is essentially the point of social constructs and stigmas, especially when they benefit society. So it's frustrating because I'm like, damn, how do I still fall victim to this? But it's also like, that's the whole point, because this small group of people benefit from me falling victim to believing these things about myself just because I'm in a bigger body. I get in my head a lot when I'm making content because the small voice, even though like I'm a very small creator, but the people that I have here, I have because I think they resonate with the content I'm making. There are other people in larger bodies who follow me and like need the resources, want to follow my recommendations. So like that is what I keep trying to remind myself, because that's the work, that's the advocating I'm trying to do. And also it's just fun to create a community that is like-minded people or who have gone through similar things or who just like me, you know? But I get in my head, and the small voice is like, no one wants to listen to the fat girl talk about the fat shaming that she's experienced in her life, or the fact that she can't find clothes, or the fact that sometimes when she's with her friends, she feels like shit. And that's nothing against my friends. I have amazing friends. But like those things still seep in no matter what. And that's not me being like, woe is me, I chose to be fat, so I have to deal with it. Like, that is such a fucking backwards way of thinking. No one chooses to be in a situation where they're gonna be discriminated against. And yeah, I'm using the word discrimination because it does happen. Fat people are less likely to get a job, less likely to go seek out medical care because of discrimination. Like, there are facts, and I'll drop the links. I will, because this is like scientifically studied. I'm not just making this up. If you're someone who's been through trauma as well, you may also know that oftentimes therapists are like, trauma stays with you forever. Unlearning fat phobia, unlearning racism, unlearning your internal biases that are programmed from you, especially in the United States from a young age, is a lifelong commitment. Fighting these voices, these demons that have convinced me that I am less than because I weigh over 250 pounds. Sorry, who decided that that means I'm less than? All of this is to say that I have been a little bit quiet on my page, a little bit distant, because I've been going through a season of just worthlessness, which, again, I know what is real and what is true, and I am worthy, but fat phobia is a societal stigma, which means essentially the whole world is rooting against you, and you have to try to have your voice
Wow.
be louder than the world, and that's really fucking hard to do sometimes. So just know that this page is a safe space for all of you. Remember that fat phobia is a societal stigma that is not the same, but parallel to homophobia, sexism, ableism, racism, and we need to start advocating for it the same way. A lot of
Wow. That's major, major zombie. So this is a clicker. This is crazy. I am horrified at her therapist, absolutely disgusted at her therapist. Her therapist is complete trash on so many levels. She has been reinforced in her problem constantly going to therapy. What is the point of therapy if you're going to be reinforced in your issue? I need somebody who loves therapy, please tell me. What is the point? I can't see a more abysmal failure than a therapist who is supposed to be educated about these issues, encouraging it, continuing to make it worse, creating more externalization of blame, creating more victimization, self-victimization, and then trying to dress it up in some kind of weird political language, which is incredibly reinforcing. It shows me that this therapist is an activist. This therapist is not a therapist. This therapist is pushing some kind of an agenda, which is bizarre because your weight and racism have nothing to do with each other. Your weight and homophobia have nothing to do with each other. They're a completely different discussion. And especially when she gets into, I don't have a choice in this. Whoa. What therapist is telling her that? That is not helpful. That is extremely reinforcing. So I want to know who her therapist is. You know, I try not to feel hopeless about the situation. I'm going to be real. You know, I talked about GLP-1s yesterday and why I think they're going to be banned. I might do a video in more detail about that. I think it will be in years' time. I'm thinking like 2 to 3 years at least. But there are so many of you guys that are so confident that I'm wrong. And the fact is, you do not understand how entrenched this is. You do not understand how bad this really is. You still think that fat activists have no power, that there's no institutional basis. There are 2 more anti-FA creators that have been demonetized very recently. But they don't have any power. Oh, well, that won't happen. That won't happen. I need you to wake up. I need you to get real. This is what therapists are telling people with these issues. I need you to wake the fuck up. This is a therapist encouraging a severe person to her death. That is what's happening. And it is awful. It is abysmal. It shows the state of care in the United States is such utter trash when it comes to this issue. It is disgusting. This should be illegal. Her therapist should be fired. Her therapist should lose their, I'm guessing her, usually is a her, should lose their license. They should not be allowed to practice therapy. You should never be encouraging and affirming the delusion behind E followed by the letter D. That is horrible, but it happens all the time. It's disgusting. And again, it's just so nice, right? But when she ends up dead, she doesn't seem any better. She doesn't seem like she's making any progress at all. She talks about worthlessness. She talks about how it's a lifelong battle. It's never going to go away. She's never going to get better. How is this helpful? How is this allowed any kind of legitimacy? So when I tell you GLP-1s are going to be banned, this is why. Because it is not just a random person online. It's a therapist. It's your scientists. It's people in corporations. It's a lot of fucking people that are delulu and crazy and weird, that have institutional power, that are concentrated in these areas when it comes to EFAW by the letter D, or anything adjacent to health and fitness. They're everywhere. So you tell me, you are really that confident? And some of you guys, oh, they're not going to let that happen. How much money? Because there's so much money in GLP-1s. There's so much more money in obesity than GLP-1s. There are so many more financial interests in keeping obesity alive than there are in GLP-1s. There's so much more money in big food. There's so much more money in big pharma. Somebody commented and they're like, well, you don't have to take this drug or that one. Just take a GLP-1. You don't think that that's a conflict of interest for other companies? You don't think that they are ready and willing to harness the power of zombieism to rally to get this banned? You don't think they're willing to fund studies that are slanted? You are delusional. Like I said, I try not to be hopeless, but I need all of us to be very real. We are not in a good position. And I hate having to say that because people get pissed at me for telling people that this is bad. People get mad at the messenger. 2 more channels were demonetized this week. Now one got the monetization back, but will it last? You guys do not understand. You don't understand the problem. People with these issues, they will talk about it endlessly forever. They will fight way harder than the average person. And most people are passive and they listen. I try to tell you. I try. Now, one caveat is I do feel like people might fight for it when it comes to diabetes, but I don't even know if they'll do that because it'll just happen one day. After years of demonization, after years of funded studies by all of these different groups that don't want them on the market. From your average EFAW by the letter D zombie to your trainers that don't like it, to your food companies that don't like it, to other pharmaceutical companies that don't like it, to the general public that isn't even a fan of it. If you really ask people, most people don't like it. The only people that like these drugs are some people in the TR, fireflies, and AKA people that are interested in getting back to a place where obesity isn't taking over everything. And I guess, I can't remember the country, but wherever Novo Nordisk is based, that country, maybe they can lobby the US government. That might be an activistic thing we can try to do. But honestly, there are so many people against these drugs. And you have people with these issues all across, in all these positions of power, and therapists. And then you'll have her too, because she'll probably speak out against it too. They're not going to let it go. I think that you guys don't understand. People don't let this shit go. I'm trying to bridge a gap here. I'm trying to let you know how people act in these issues. They're not going to let it go. They wake up every day thinking about how GLP-1s are ruining everything. If you have all these people thinking that, people that are in the reductive, people that are within bingo, people that are losing money because of it, they're all thinking about how much they hate them. And you have almost everybody against these drugs. I'm telling you. And then because I say that, then I'm demonized because I'm telling you what's happening. I think it's too late. It's probably going to happen. And then, well, you're just crazy, Alex. You're just crazy. Because I'm telling you something you don't want to hear. But I'm an activist. What are we going to do in fat acceptance when they're gone? Or in anti-fat acceptance? What are we going to do? Us fireflies need to start thinking now. We need to start strategizing, because when those drugs go down, they are going to use that to the highest levels. And if there are a lot of people that regain, they are going to use that forever. So you need to think of a strategy. If you are in this fight, you need to think about what you're going to say, because it doesn't have to make sense. It doesn't have to make sense. You need to understand that. Well, that doesn't make any sense. They've been around for 20 years. It doesn't matter. They'll come up with a documentary in 5 years about how it was horrible that they were ever around for 20 years. They'll put it on Netflix. It doesn't matter. And people don't care. They don't care. I'm going to document it on the channel. I told you guys. I know. They are going to push. The only way that it's not going to happen is if the public suddenly cares about health, which maybe, I told you, there are some elements of hope in this current climate. I think Gen Z especially, they could actually help with this because they seem to care about health somewhat, although definitely not all of them, but a large portion of them do. And they're going to be getting more into institutions and stuff as these years go by. So that may help. But if you take back the culture, then you might be able to prevent it. But I think it's too late, honestly. And it's not that I didn't try. It's not that we haven't been trying. It's just, how are you supposed to do this? How are you supposed to do this? She went to a therapist, and her therapist told her this. Her therapist went to school for years. Her therapist, that means her therapist went to a university that taught that. Her therapist is not the only one. Do you understand what we're up against? Are you starting to see it?
Therapy that I've been through in my life has been for related needs, and a lot of what I've done in that therapy is unlearning fat phobia.
I can't think of a worse use of time within a therapy session. I think that is one of the stupidest things ever. I think what should be immediately focused upon is body neutrality, or starting to not think about it anymore. Why do you think about it so much? Because I have to. Why do you think you have to? Because, you don't. You see? Why is that not the first conversation? Do you think that everybody else thinks about it all the time? Yeah, I do. What would you think if I told you they don't, though? Or what if I told you most people don't? How would that change how you view this? I'd be surprised. Well, yeah. Do you think I could ever be like that? Yeah, you absolutely can. You can get there. Even if it takes years, you can. See how different that is? See how that's not That's not reinforcing. You don't have to be nasty to not reinforce, especially if someone's coming to you for help. They're going to be more receptive. And I really feel for her. I feel for her trying to get help, and this is what she got. It's not her fault. That is not her fault. That is a systemic issue. That is real. That is very, very real.
Fat phobia is a societal stigma. Societal stigma, say that 3 times fast. Societal stigma that does affect people the same way that people who are gay experience discrimination.
There's no diet to not be gay. This is a homophobic statement. So I guess her therapist is teaching her homophobia. Love that.
People who have disabilities experience discrimination.
It's ableist. You can lose weight. Somebody who is disabled in a way that they did not choose or cannot fix, that is not the same thing as weight. Why? Because weight can be fixed. Weight is a choice. So it is not good to make that comparison. It's not the same thing. Once again, I had somebody tell me, even if it's a choice, that's still a disability. Some people choose to get their leg cut off, but you can still lose weight. You can't regrow a leg. They don't see it. They view it the same way. Can you imagine? And that's reinforced in therapy. Yeah, it's the same thing. Do you understand the dystopia that we're in? Again, I don't want to be so negative all the time, but I just don't think you guys are getting it. I don't think a lot of you are getting it. And then you're blaming me because I told you.
The phobia that's at the end of fat phobia, same thing that's at the end of homophobia, ableism.
It's a toxic ritualistic, aka E followed by the letter D, manipulation of language in order to blame shift and in order to hide a problem. It is textbook. It is used to hide the behaviors that you are doing, primarily binge. You want to hide it. So instead, you use political buzzwords or at times religious buzzwords in order to hide what you're doing. Because you must. Why? Because it's obvious what you're doing. Why? Because of how you look. So you have to campaign and act like it has nothing to do with what you're doing, which is completely false. And a therapist should never, ever reinforce. Remember, you are reinforcing death. You are committing malpractice as a therapist if you are encouraging somebody's delusion. That is horrible.
Racism.
It's racist to compare weight to race.
Sexism. Like, they all come together.
It's sexist to compare sex to weight. They're teaching bigotry to people in therapy. That is what we're doing here. That is what we're doing.
And not, those struggles are not the same in any ways.
They're not at all. Okay?
Which I really try to not compare them.
You shouldn't, but you always do. People within binge, they always compare, especially if it's severe, which in her case it is.
But there are a lot of parallels, and I don't think a lot of
No, there's not.
people have framed their brains to be able to see fat phobia. Now, I make a lot of content.
So she's trying to spread that too, to a lot of people too, which I don't necessarily blame her. I think she's trying to help. But it's just very sad.
on my page about being plus size, specifically about fashion and other things that like help being plus size. And
her whole identity revolves around this. That's something that should be challenged in therapy. Who are you outside of your weight? I don't know. Well, think about it. Let's talk it out. See how healing that would be? See what her therapist didn't ask her?
sometimes, even though I have been through a ton of therapy and a ton of
it's not doing anything.
Learning, I also have a degree in sociology. Still get beat down, and that is essentially the point of social constructs and stigmas, especially when they benefit society. So it's frustrating because I'm like,
how does this benefit society? That's something that I would have asked her if I could. I wish I could ask her that.
damn, how do I still fall victim to this? But it's also like, that's the whole point, because this small group of people benefit from me
Who?
falling victim to believing these things about myself just because I'm in a bigger body. I get in my head a lot when I'm making content because...
So that's a little bit paranoid. I think the vast majority of people don't think about her being in a bigger body. So why is that also being encouraged in therapy? That yes, people are thinking about that all the time. I think it's important to consider how our size can affect others, especially at very big sizes. I think it's important to think about how at times other people may have issues or internalized issues that they project onto us because of our size. I think it's important to talk about how people within these issues all reinforce each other and how to prevent that. How do we protect ourselves from that? Because we can. We don't have to listen to it. We don't have to internalize if somebody with an issue says something nasty about our weight. That would be teaching resilience. That would be teaching and understanding that that person is also mentally ill, more than likely, just as you are, so you can understand. You try to create that, try to get that empathy back into this person so that she can function better. But no, I guess that's not for therapy, I guess.
The small voice, even though, like, I'm a very small creator, but the people that I have here, I have because I think they resonate with the content I'm making. There are other people in larger bodies who follow me and, like, need the resources, want to follow my recommendations. So, like, that is what I keep trying to remind myself, because that's the work, that's the advocating I'm trying to do. And also, it's just fun to create a community that is like-minded people or who have
reinforcing,
have gone through similar things, or who just like me, you know.
Do they like you or do they like your size? Because if you were to downsize, would they still like you? It's an important question. And could you handle it if they didn't anymore?
No. But I get in my head, and the small voice is like, no one wants to listen to the fat girl talk about the fat shaming that she's experienced in her life, or the fact that she can't find clothes, or the fact that sometimes when she's with her friends, she feels like shit.
So I think that this type of content is constantly praised, constantly sought after, constantly created because it's reinforcing. It's reinforcing of all of the issues within You Fall by the Letter D. It tells every person that has a problem why they need to do what they're doing. It's very toxic. At times it's not even real. At times they can be delusional, especially if a person is severe. They might be assuming what people think about them or coming up with scenarios in their head that have no basis in reality. Again, who is this small group of people that benefits from her being fat or from her hating herself as a fat person? Is that based in reality, or is there some delusional aspects to that, right? It needs to at least be questioned and explored because it sounds a little bit paranoid.
And that's nothing against my friends. I have amazing friends. But like those things still seep in no matter what. And that's not me being like, woe is me.
I think it's because deep down you understand that you're living a lie. And I've heard somebody, I think it was Robin, she said that she thinks that people that are clicker levels, so I call that a level 3 zombie. I talk about E by letter D in terms of Last of Us zombieism. And she said that a clicker, which is what this girl is, she said a clicker is, they tend to have like pathological lying tendencies. And it's true. It's very true. Because you're so deeply delusional. And when you're severe in the problem, your entire life is based around it. Your entire life. You know, so much so that I talk about it. When I left it, I experienced an identity crisis because I left the DIS order. And I experienced what I called on the channel a tortured era, which had to do with the listlessness after leaving. And I talk about it, or I think about it in terms of like when you first leave, it's like the breakup, right? It's raw, it's real, it's, ooh, that was kind of my super morbidly obese Eras Tour era, you know? But when you're tortured, that's the process of falling out of love. It's a longer process. It's a more complicated process. What will I do next? Who will I be? Who am I now without this? The reason that happens in recovery is because when you are so severe, your entire life is based around it. And I did have somebody recently comment that was dealing with the reductive. They said that they had that same identity crisis upon upsizing and getting out. And it's so awful when it gets this severe. In my heart of hearts, I really feel for a person struggling as much as she's struggling. I understand it. But you're never going to get out of it through affirmations. You need to reject it. You have to cast it out, throw it in the trash, burn it down. One of my tortured era songs that I used was But Daddy, I Love Him. And she says, I'd rather burn my whole life down than to listen to all this bitching and moaning. You have to do that. If it's that severe of a thing, you have to be willing to burn it down because your whole life is built on it. And that can feel devastating, but it's also liberating too. And I try on this channel to, this is really bringing back my tortured era to my mind, but I've tried to be that albatross, to show it's possible, or to show that, to give that sign of hope. You think I'm the most evil, horrible person, right? Like in the legend of the albatross, when they think the bird is cursed, right? But in reality, the bird is protecting you. The bird is looking out for you on the seas. It's the same thing. When we do this publicly, we're trying to warn you. We're trying to show you it's possible to get out. And that's constantly demonized. I try to do the same thing as an activist with the general public, but people don't listen, and that's just a part of being an activist. It's annoying a lot of the time. But as far as the recovery aspect, I try to show you you can get out. You will be okay. The fear will pass. There is hope. And it just kills me that she goes to a therapist and her therapist is telling her all this bullshit that just reinforces everything.
I chose to be fat, so I have...
You do. You chose to be fat for many reasons. You did not choose to be traumatized. That's true. But you choose to be fat. And you choose to remain in the coping mechanism. And you can choose to leave it. It is a choice. It's a very powerful choice. And when you're getting to severity, it can be life and death. And she's not on a good path
to deal with it. Like, that is such a fucking backwards way of thinking. No
it's reality. You are choosing to be fat.
one chooses to be in a situation where they're going to be discriminated against.
There are a lot of situations where people choose to avoid others. There's avoidant attachment. I talk about it a lot because I think it's very relevant. There's also fearful avoidant attachment, which is where you have like a mixture. But there's a lot of people who want to avoid intimacy with others, or who want to avoid other people. And weight is one of the most common ways that somebody does that, precisely because it's a choice. And I do think it's relevant in the reductive as well, because when you're a part of a regime, I don't mean that in like a government sense. I mean that in like a, I don't know. I have to be so careful with how I talk about it. When you're involved in a system of habits, I'll put it to you that way, a habitual regime, you can often use that to avoid others. So I can't go anywhere because there's going to be certain stuff there, right? So being avoidant can be a complicating factor within the toxic ritualistic, within E fall by letter D. Because you can use that to stay away from other people too, at a severe level of the reductive. So people do it all the time, is what I'm trying to say. Especially when it's E fall by the letter D, because it's a choice, because it's all based around choice and control. So you're wrong. And, a lot of times people become avoidant because they've been deeply hurt, because they're scared, because there's bad growing up situations, right? There's a lot of reasons that can happen. And that can be trauma-based, and that trauma is not a choice. But the avoidance is a choice. The TR is a choice. And choosing to move past that fear, that is a choice too. And it's a very powerful one.
And yeah, I'm using the word discrimination because it does happen. Fat people are less likely to get a job, less likely.
So to say all this to people in the TR, it's extremely triggering and it's extremely reinforcing, because one of the main things, one of the basic ideals of the toxic ritualistic world is that we can control how others see us, particularly based around size. So if you tell somebody that, people will hate you because you are in a bigger body. That is incredibly reinforcing. It's extremely triggering. It's also not necessarily true. Because I can assure you, you can also be thin and people can still hate you. So they're not exactly connected. Put it to you that way.
to go seek out medical care because of discrimination. Like,
you have to be able to understand that you're never going to be able to control how people see you all the time. It's impossible. It is impossible. I still have to stop myself from going down that path in my mind because it's never real. It was never true. You can't control it. There's still times, so many years post-recovery, even post-recovery now, but there's certain logical things that I still brush up against. There's certain control issues I still have with certain things, but you have to let it go when it comes up. And I do think that is another thing in American culture. We're constantly taught that we have control over everything. And I think sometimes in America, a lot of people overcorrect and then they say you don't have control over anything. So there's like a rebellious side to that cultural ideal. But I think that's delusional, and it's also delusional to say that we have control over everything, because I didn't choose the trauma I went through. I'm sure she didn't either. We don't choose that. We don't have control over that. And that can feel vulnerable and scary and all these things. But ultimately, life can be very beautiful, and there can be beautiful surprises and beautiful things that we could not have predicted or that we could not have controlled. And you can't, for example, control somebody into loving you. So you can't experience true love if you're obsessed with control. So if we are hyper obsessed with that, we cut ourselves off from a lot of things. And not everything out of control is bad. And that's the work. That's what you have to understand. That's what you have to learn. And sometimes bad things are going to happen that are out of your control. And you deal with it. You process it. You cope with it without the TR. And that's recovery. And you have to find ways of doing that are healthful, that are healthy and good.
there are facts and facts and facts, and I'll drop the links. I will, because this is like scientifically studied. I'm not just making this up. If you're someone who's been through
Your weight is in your control. So I don't want to hear it. I just don't. I'm not entertaining it.
trauma as well, you may also know that oftentimes therapists are like, trauma stays with you forever. Unlearning fat phobia.
So I don't think that that's very helpful for a therapist to say. I really don't. I think that's a very negative way to look at things. I think we have to understand that trauma does change us, but we can also continue to change. So we may not have been who we were before the traumatic event happened or the traumatic time happened, but we don't have to stay who we became forever. We can change again. I think what's so important to understand in TR recovery is that we have control over ourselves. We do. That's the power and that's the danger of it. And we do have control over who we are, too. That's the power and that's the danger. And I think a lot of people in this issue have a hard time understanding that. And that's something you must take control over in a positive way.
Unlearning racism.
Let's unlearn racism, absolutely. But let's also unlearn the TR. Let's unlearn that. Let's focus on that, because that's dangerous. That's going to kill you. So that should be at the top of your list. There's so many things that we can unlearn that are also negative, absolutely. But we need to prioritize the TR. And for the record, if you get rid of the TR, it might make you a little nicer anyways. So some of those other issues might just go away.
Learning your internal biases that are programmed from you, especially in the United States from a young age.
The TR makes you very status conscious, very obsessed with this type of stuff all the time. And it can also make you extremely superficial. And at severe levels, it can reduce your empathy for others. So it's really important to get out of the TR. I think it should be your top priority. And I think any other work that you need to do, it will be easier if you are out of the TR. So if you're having issues with empathy with other people, or you're struggling to understand people who are different than you, for example, getting out of that, it can open up the mind too, so that you can process that stuff. I don't know if she has a lot of issues with that stuff, but you know, it doesn't always have to be like deep bigotry, etc. Sometimes it can be just a misunderstanding. Like, for example, for me, because of my experience with my dad, I did not understand masculinity very well. And I struggled a lot with more masculine guys for much of my life. And I had a deep distrust because of what I went through. So I lacked empathy. But I worked through that. And as I got out of the TR especially, it became easier to put myself in the shoes of somebody who's different than me. And so I have more understanding. And there's less fear and all those things. So I'm just saying it doesn't always have to be like something rooted in political bigotry. It can be anything. For a lot of people in the TR, it can be thin people. You know, I think a lot of women within BINGE, especially severely so, they cannot empathize with thin women at all. It could help if you got out. So it's not always about that. But when you're in that, your brain views everything so black and white. And it's just very important to get out. I don't know how else to say it. There's so many reasons why you need to get out.
Is a lifelong commitment. Fighting these voices, these demons that have convinced me that I am less than because I weigh over 250 pounds. Sorry, who decided that means I'm less than? All of this is to say
your disorder is deciding
that I have been a little bit quiet on my page, a little bit distant, because I've been going through a season of just worthlessness, which, again, I know what is real and what is true.
Worthlessness is definitely a part of the TR.
And I am worthy. But fat phobia is a societal stigma, which means
she's being taught to externalize it. Not helpful.
Actually, the whole world is rooting against you.
No, that's paranoia. It's not healthy. It's not true. Most people are apathetic. Like I said, there are definitely systemic issues, which we've seen one of them. Her therapist is a systemic issue. Absolutely. But what you're dealing with in here 24/7 is your greatest enemy.
And you have to try to have your voice be louder than the world. And that's really fucking hard to do sometimes. So just know that this page is a safe space for all of you. Remember that fat phobia.
I don't know if it is after hearing this.
Is a societal stigma that is not the same, but parallel to homophobia,
No.
sexism,
No.
ableism,
No.
racism,
No.
and we need to start advocating for it the same way. A lot of the therapy.
No. uh, we don't advocate for a DIS order. We get rid of it. But thank you guys so much for watching. I had quite a rant in this. I do just want to let you guys know I am going through a little bit of anhedonia. So, yeah, I'm a little numb at times. I felt like I was able to get back to that, but it's because I'm increasing cals. So, yeah, my brain is still quite sensitive due to the years of what I've done. So, anyways, thank you guys so much. I will talk to you guys later. Bye.